Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Becoming JFK, none other than Mr. Scott Badler. Welcome, Mr. Scott, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yes, it's great to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles, and that's where I sort of became interested in the Kennedys. And I moved to Boston after a number of years, and came back 25 years ago from Boston. But I guess my first interest in the Kennedys, I remember it was Election Day, 1960, and I was on the playground. I was for the Kennedys, and the first thing I remember is yelling "Nix on Nixon," which is, of course, Vice President Nixon, who was Kennedy's opponent. And that's the first instance I can remember at this point of about the Kennedys. And then, of course, the assassination happened, and after that, I sort of become enamored with Robert Kennedy, and was very sad, of course, when he was assassinated, and sort of kept an interest in the Kennedys for many years. And when I went to Boston, I was able to kind of get to know them a little bit. And then when I came back, I decided to do some writing. So the first book I did was JFK and the Muckers of Choate. And that was a book I somehow became aware that Kennedy, he's sort of this mythic person where we see him when he's president. He's 43 years old, this handsome man. But I learned that he was kind of a rebellious teenager, that he was kicked out of prep school, that he saw a therapist, and various other things, and led an insurrection at the school. So I wrote that book, historical fiction, called JFK and the Muckers of Choate. And the newest one, Coming JFK, which is nonfiction, takes it right from that point.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Scott, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. What was the specific document, anecdote, or historical detail you encountered about JFK's time at that convinced you to a period was worthy of a full length novel?
Oh, well, that first one, just I think the thing, couple of different things, but just that he led some sort of insurrection at the school, which was Choate. And so that surprised me, that he was this rebellious character, and that he even at the young age he saw a therapist. So those things convinced me to write the novel, and then I decided to go on from there and write Becoming JFK. And the thing that sort of got me started there was learning that JFK was in jail. It was a very short time, but just the fact that JFK was in jail was kind of important. There's also was a point where he and his brother started to diverge. His brother didn't really step up when this party got out of hand, and the police came and hauled him off to jail. And JFK, I think, realized from that point on that he had to go his own route, and not rely on his brother to kind of handle things. He was the older brother that people thought was going to be the next president of the United States, but in my opinion, he never would have been the next president of the United States.
Interesting, Mr. Scott. As a real to life novel, you had to blend historical record with narrative invention. Can you walk
No,
us
it's
through?
all true. It's all true. Becoming JFK is nonfiction.
Okay,
It's
so
all
is this a novel, a memoir, or which one?
it's nonfiction. It's nonfiction. So it's truth. Becoming JFK is true, nonfiction. The other one, JFK and the Muckers of Choate, that was historical fiction. But the new one is true. It's nonfiction.
Okay, so what we are talking about today is the nonfiction, right?
Right, right.
Okay, so tell us, what are your struggles in writing becoming JFK?
Um, I think there's a number of things that forced me to kind of look pretty deep and look in the archives there of the Kennedy Library to look at all these oral histories and to kind of decide what was truth and what wasn't. One was kind of looking at the myth of Joe Kennedy, his older brother, the myth of him being the one who was going to be president of the United States. And I was able to do enough research where I realized that actually JFK had passed his brother Joe by the time Joe had died in World War II. Um, so JFK had already written a bestseller called Why England Slept. He also was a war hero. His father, Joseph Kennedy, was the ambassador to England, and he relied on his son, JFK, for advice on rehabilitating his reputation. So people think that Joe was going to be the next president of the United States, but Jack had already passed his brother, and actually symbolically, he had a higher rank at the end when Joe died. Some other things that came up during the research was the major thing is the PT 109 episode. So there I was able to do some research and discover some things about what happened before the Japanese ship crashed into Kennedy's PT 109. And there's always been some controversy about that. JFK has said after the event, they're either going to court martial me or give me a medal. So you can tell how conflicted about it he was. I mean, we know that his crew was not on alert, that he didn't have all three engines running. Um, so I look at that controversy, and one of the things I've discovered is that I think he was so heroic after his ship was basically cut in half, and he was so heroic in trying to save his men and going out to the ocean and looking for help. That I think some of that had to do with some guilt. He felt guilt that two people had died um, under his command, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if he'd had all engines running, if his men had been alert. So I think that guilt spurred him on to even heroic measures.
How did you go about capturing the specific voice, wit, and internal world of a young Jack Kennedy long before become the public figure we know?
Well, I'm able to listen to some voice recordings of him. Certainly, I've watched tons and tons of video of him, and of course, his voice did change as he got older. But I think I used some of the inflections. I used some of the phrases he used, the sort of clipped Boston accent to help me get the voice of JFK. So that all helped. And then, there's lots and lots of pictures, fortunately, of JFK and all the Kennedys. So just studying them helped me really kind of round out the character of JFK, what he was, how witty he was, how funny he was, how charismatic he was, even at that young age.
What was the most surprising or contradictory facet of a young Jack personality you discovered that challenges the polished, heroic image of JFK we have today?
Hmm. So I suppose there's a couple of different things there. One that we don't think of JFK being cheap. He comes from a very privileged background. His father was one of the richest men in the United States, but yet JFK was cheap. So we all have our he'd go out and he'd rely on others to pay for him, and he'd borrow money, wouldn't pay it back. So it's a little thing, but it shows that he was human. That he had these frailties, these drawbacks like any other human. So that surprised me. Um, what else? He was a person who didn't have a lot of empathy. We think of JFK as certainly a great politician, but he was, sort of narcissistic, and he didn't have a lot of empathy for other people. He wasn't someone who would do a lot of favors for other people. So those two things, the cheapness and the sort of lack of empathy, surprised me.
Surprised you for sure. So, how did you dramatize the immense pressure Jack was under, leaving the shadow of his older brother's family anointed golden boy.
Yeah, it was always a very difficult thing because, as I say, people have always thought that Joe was the golden boy, and Jack had to really deal with that. A certain way he couldn't overcome his brother. He had to sort of wait his turn, but yet, one interesting thing was when he did go to see a therapist. The therapist did find out that he was opting out of any competition with his brother. So at Choate, his grades were terrible. He was lazy. And the reason was he didn't think he could compete with his brother. So he opted out of any competition with his brother. But when I started to write the new book and that event where he was jailed, he realized he's going to go his own way. And he's not going to be in the shadow of his brother. And pretty soon he's passing him. So that was something I wanted to write about and explain to people that, JFK had actually passed his brother by the time of his death.
Mr. Scott, JFK's lifelong friendship with Lem Billings began at Cho. How does their relationship serve as a window into Jack's capacity for loyalty and his need for its true confidence?
Yeah, that's a very interesting relationship. I mean, they became friends at Choate, and of course, this was an era of when no one came out. I mean, Lem Billings was. There's no doubt he was gay, and he, was in love with JFK to a certain extent. He made a pass at him when he was and offered him, sexual favor when he was at Choate. But they complemented each other. Admittedly, Billings was sort of a bit of a lapdog. He'd always follow Jack around. He'd do whatever Jack wanted. He helped in the campaign. But it was a very crucial friendship. He didn't talk about politics with Lem Billings. He didn't talk about women with Lem Billings. Well, that would make sense since Lem was gay. But he was someone he could sort of confide in and just have a good time with, and that was very important for him. Lem Billings later had a room at the White House, so this is someone JFK kept around and served a purpose of just someone he could just relax and have fun with.
Okay, interesting. So, what was the true nature of his conflict with Jack and Marcus? Was it a simple clash of disobedience versus authority or something more complex?
No, I don't think it was too complex. He just really couldn't handle all the restrictions of a prep school. I mean, they were very, very tight. And, if you were outside your room after 10 o'clock, you were scolded. So he just really had a difficult time with all the structure or the rigidness of that school. That wasn't like him, and he found it very, very difficult. So he lashed out in a certain way by forming this group, the Muckers, and they really didn't even do anything bad. It was just sort of an attitude. But at some point, the schoolmaster said, we can't have this anymore. And he said, you guys need to be on the next train out of here. But it was rescinded. Some teachers came to him and said, that's not, we're going to lose so much money and you're acting too abruptly. So, the it was rescinded.
Rescinded. So let's talk about the themes and relevance. In your view, how did the trials and rebellions of his short years specifically forget the leadership qualities of JFK would later displayed in the White House?
I think his leadership really began, after Choate. He after he graduated from Choate, he went for a little while to England. But I think when he came back to the United States and his health improved a little bit, he became something of a leader by becoming the chairman of something called the Smoker. It's an event at Harvard they have, and you can tell by the name there was a lot of smoking. But He set the whole thing up. He was the chairman of it. There was a lot of Hollywood celebrities there, so he became a leader in that sense. He ran for some minor office at Harvard, but he didn't really win. He played a little bit of a football. I wouldn't say he was actually a leader there. So I think he didn't really become a leader until later, and I would say what that had to do with going into the Navy. He wasn't like he was captain of the football team at Harvard or anything like that. So I think until he joined the Navy, became the skipper of PT 109, that's where his real leadership began to show.
Ken Chot in the 1930s can be seen as a microcosm of the American elite.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Mr.
you.
Scott, Ken Chot in the 1930s has been as the microcosm of the American elite. What does this story tell us about class, expectation, and conformity in that era?
Yeah, it certainly there was this class difference. I mean, everybody who went to Choate was certainly in the elite. It was one of the more prominent prep schools. Since then, some other famous people have gone there. I know Trump's daughter has gone there. So, it tells us that this is where the elite went. And, that certainly had an effect. I mean, he was certainly unaware of even the Depression. He has written about that he sort of wasn't aware of the Depression in the 30s. And you can tell that if you're not aware of something like depression, you're sort of removed from what's happening in reality.
What were the real risks and consequences for young men like JFK in challenging established order of an institution like Chuck?
Well, I don't know about Choate. It was sort of a minor thing. And I think after Choate, he sort of found his own way and found his own voice, whether that was at Harvard. Certainly, he found that when he traveled throughout Europe, when he was advising his father, who was the ambassador to England, on certain things he should do. I mean, his father, Joseph Kennedy, was against helping. He was an appeaser. His father was against helping Britain during the war, as the war began in 1939. And I think he found his leadership voice. JFK didn't believe that the United States should stay out of the war. He believed that they should be involved, that should, at the very least, give arms to England and to the Allies. So he was a key voice in convincing his father that the U.S. Should not be appeasers, that they should help their allies. And soon after he wrote a memo for his father agreed and changed his viewpoint on Lend-Lease, which was a key thing in providing supplies, military supplies, and other supplies to the Allies during their fight against England, not against Germany. Sorry.
We all know how JFK's story ends. How did you work to create a narrative tension and suspense in the story where the ultimate outcome is historical fact?
Well, of course, the book goes from when he's 18 to 29. Um, so it doesn't go beyond. It ends with his first congressional win, and he becomes a congressman from Massachusetts. And that's a major thing. There's little hints of his mortality. As he's the day before the election, he collapses. As we all know, JFK was ill throughout his life. He had been given last rites several times before, and when he collapsed on Bunker Hill Day, the day before the election, a state legislator said, "Actually, looks like he's having a heart attack." So we all know that JFK had health problems, and you could sort of say that was um, a hint of what was going to come. Um, the assassination has nothing to do with my book becoming JFK, and we all know what happened. So I stick to his young JFK when he is war years, and afterwards when he's traveling throughout Europe, and when he's writing his book. So those are the things I stick with.
Yes, interesting. Mr. Scott, did your research led you to any what if moments? A pivotal event in chart that, had it gone slightly differently, could have altered the course of JFK's life.
Yeah. Well, I think one of them might be PT 109. Say he had all three engines running, he might have been able to avoid that Japanese destroyer. Now, if he avoided that Japanese destroyer, he never would have been a hero. And it's said that he never would have been president if he hadn't been a war hero. So that's one key thing. Let's see if there's some others. I think that's sort of the biggest one. By sort of not being alert, he became a war hero, and that sort of changed his life, and in a certain way led to him being the president.
So, Mr. Scott, as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
My short and long term goals are to write about another politician, about their young life. I find writing about famous people and their young life in their teenage and 20s and 30s gives an incredible indication of what they're going to become greater in life. Sometimes it might be bad, sometimes it might be good. It can be a combination of the two, but it's so much more interesting to me to write about their young life, the things that happened to them, that shaped them, that led them to be what they turned out to be.
Good luck to your goals, Master Scott, and looking forward for more books to come. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you?
Research and read. Those would be the two things. If you read and research, you're on your way.
Read, research, people. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence you, Johnny?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I'm asking you, Mr. Scott, what are the books or books that influence you, Johnny?
That influenced. Let's see. I have a whole library of Kennedy books, and I can almost look at my shelf here. But one would be PT 109. It was a key book and provided a lot of research for me. Another one is Reckless Youth. Was very helpful. That book is also about his youth, so I used that extensively in my research. But I think I went beyond that. So those are a couple of books that I think people would enjoy, in addition to mine. Um,
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Scott. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast people, because my abstract essay is already in fourth season or in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth
okay.
season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, in Science 101 and Sex 101
Seems
in
very
fifth
interesting.
season.
Good. I look forward to looking at those.
Yes, please. So, Mr. Scott, my last question is excuse me, if you could have readers take away one central idea or feeling about young men who would become president, what would it be?
I think it. One thing I've noticed in other characters I've studied is incredible persistence. They have things that knock them down. JFK's health was terrible. His boat was destroyed, but he had incredible persistence. Persist. Whether you're writing or want to become a president of the United States, persist.
Persistent is the key. Wow, I like that, Mr. Scott. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book itself? Mr.
Invite my
Scott,
listeners to what?
to support your book.
Yes, please support my book. I think you'll find it very interesting reading. You'll learn a lot and learn about one of our most famous presidents, but learn things that you never heard about before.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Scott Badler because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Scott, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Mordecai, people, see you